Okay, so I am still daily pinching myself that I got to see Hamilton last month. I hear from your applause that some of you know what this show is. My family decided last year to invest in season tickets so that my oldest and I could actually see this show that we have been obsessed about for over a year. If you're unfamiliar with Hamilton, it is a modern hip-hop musical that tells the story of our founding father, Alexander Hamilton. And the music is fun and fast-paced, and we love to crank it up in our kitchen and dance around. I even happen to like dancing in my car on occasion. A friend caught me recently. I saw you at a stoplight, she told me, and you were having a really good time. And I leaned over and told my husband, I bet she's dancing to Hamilton. Sure enough, she knew exactly what I was listening to. The music in Hamilton and the message is varied and powerful and beautiful, but there is this theme of legacy, this driving force in Hamilton's life. He is compelled by this desire to create something that outlives him. And I strongly resonate with that desire, to live a life that means something. My college admissions essays aren't so great, but they are riddled with grandiose plans of being a world changer. I chose to get a degree in public administration because I thought that was how I could best change the world and serve others. And while I'm not working in government now and have instead am on this path towards a Master's of Divinity, as a mom, I'm investing in 2 young lives. And I get to travel regularly and speak to moms groups like the one that meets here at Grace and share stories of my parenting fails and wins in order to encourage and inspire and challenge other moms on this journey of parenting. I have a deep desire to know that my life mattered for something, that it made a difference to the world that I was here. And I honestly, when I think about it, I think this is a universal feeling. Maybe we aren't as driven as Hamilton by this desire, but I think it's in all of us, a pull towards leaving a legacy. I know the people here at Grace are fulfilling this call in really fun and unique and exciting ways. In fact, I asked around this week, and I heard some stories. I heard about Flory Munat this morning. She had an unexpected event in her life and had to care for her husband and wrote a memoir about that experience and leaves that behind for us. Ellen Spencer traveled to Greece a few years ago to help welcome Syrian refugees, and she continues to help refugees who are resettled in the Seattle area. Tom Tyner, with a career in land trust, protecting land for generations to come. Ray Cheney and Geraldine Brousseau, a mother-daughter team who turned up tragedy into a beautiful picture of grace, into Peace Trees Vietnam, clearing landmines and cultivating communities. And of course, all of you, the founders and sustainers of this place we call Grace. So many of you are artists, authors, educators, inventors, activists, caregivers, pastors, leaving a legacy. I think Jesus was motivated by a similar desire. He lived and he taught his vision of God's kingdom, of God's upside-down ways, of what it would look like if we really loved God and loved other people. We see him continuously trying to explain this vision, explain his purpose to his friends so that they could carry on the work when he was gone. They could bring his kingdom vision to reality. In this gospel reading today, we see that. It opens with a group of Greek speakers who have come for a festival, and they're interested in meeting Jesus. And so they pull aside Philip, who happens to also speak Greek, and they ask their request. Philip runs it by committee. That's what you do, right? And then he and Andrew take the request to Jesus. But it seems Jesus doesn't even necessarily hear what they've asked. To me, it feels like Jesus has something on his mind, and it just comes out of him. He says to them, instead of answering their request, the hour has come for the Son of Man to be glorified. There is this sense that Jesus knows there is a growing unrest and that forces are at work to silence him. His words and his vision is threatening. We can feel this tension grow as we journey towards Christ's passion in this Lenten season. Jesus knows he doesn't have much longer. So what does he have on his mind? What does he say to his friends in this moment? Jesus' thoughts begin with a metaphor. And similar to the parable stories that we see in the Synoptic Gospels, Jesus' metaphor paints a picture of the world using the world of agriculture, the world that his friends know. Very truly, I tell you, Jesus says, unless a grain of wheat falls into the earth and dies, it remains just a single grain. But if it dies, it bears much fruit. I love that Jesus speaks in stories and metaphor. I am a story lover, and I am so thankful that these pictures give us a chance to engage our heads and our hearts as we unpack layers of meaning. But this one stumped me because I am not a farmer. But luckily, I have a dear friend who is married to a wheat farmer close to the Idaho border, and so I sent him a message and said, help me out here, Joe. Joe told me that the wheat seed is what we use to grind into flour. Now, many of you may know this, but most of the fruits and vegetables we eat, we don't eat the seed, but with the wheat, that is what we eat, what we grind into flour. Joe said, you cannot eat your wheat and plant it too. So holding a grain of wheat, we must decide, do we grind it into grain for food, or do we plant it and give it the potential to grow more food? But Jesus says that unless a grain of wheat falls to the ground and dies, but farmers know that dead seeds are rotten and don't produce any life. So Joe told me that actually, when we plant a seed, it is dying to its purpose as food, and in so doing, becomes transformed into something else. As a reflection on this passage, I watched a time-lapse video of a seed being planted, particularly wheat seed, on YouTube, and if you're interested or have kids, I would totally encourage you to do this at home. It's fascinating, watching the seed breaking and opening and sprouting. Cynthia Ocelli describes it this way. For a seed to achieve its greatest expression, it must come completely undone. The shell cracks, its insides come out, and everything changes. To someone who doesn't understand growth, it would look like complete destruction. But out of that appearance of destruction is in reality transformation that brings new life. Like often with his parables, Jesus doesn't just leave us with that word picture. For his friends, he begins to unpack it a little. And so he continues to teach them and says next, those who love their life lose it, and those who hate their life in this world will keep it for eternal life. Now, we have some words in our house, and you probably do too, that are like not swear words, but they're kind of swear words, like shut up or stupid. And hate is one of those words, and my kids are gasping because I've said the bad words. So hate is one of those words. It rings a bell in my ear because it's a very strong word. We don't usually use it. It was helpful to me to learn that in John's gospel, the word hate usually means more of like reject. And Jesus uses this word over and over to describe how the world sees him and in return how they see his followers. Jesus was rejected by his hometown, by the people he grew up with. He was rejected by many of his followers who were drawn to his healing ministry, but when teaching got too tough, they were out. He was rejected by the Jewish people he was sent to, religious leaders in particular. And in a heartbreaking scene at the end of his life, Jesus was rejected by his closest friends. Jesus was rejected because there's risk in following him. We have this tendency, I'm sure you have seen it, to double down, to cling tighter to what we know or believe when there is risk involved in letting go. in seeing from a different perspective, or perhaps walking a new path. We often choose to stay put when we can't quite see around the bend, but we sense that there is great sacrifice along that path. But Jesus couldn't be clearer when he sets up this duality, this either or. Hate life, lose it. Cling tightly and you'll miss out. Sorry, love life, lose it. We got to get this right. Okay, love life, lose it. Cling tightly and you'll miss out. Or hate life and you'll keep it. Risk the rejection and be transformed. What is God asking us to reject, to let die, so that we can be planted and transformed? What are you holding to so tightly that it is keeping you from the transformation that bears fruit? Self-preservation? Fear? Uncertainty? Selfishness? A different vision of what success looks like? But in order to leave a legacy worth anything, in order to produce an orchard full of fruit, we must be willing to die to our fears and our selfish desires and yield our lives to God. And Jesus is our model of a life yielded to God. And lest anyone tell you this is easy, let me assure you it is not. Just look at Jesus' own wrestling in this passage. Now my soul is troubled. And what should I say? Father, save me from this hour. There was a time in my life when I wanted to lock my doors and shut my windows and never go outside again. I was in so much pain that I thought the only way I could survive was to never feel it again. Promised myself that I would never have to feel it again. 2 years earlier, our family had yielded our fears and our questions to God and watched him transform us into a foster family. We loved with abandon the children that God brought into our care. And there was a transformation in me as I drew close to the heart of God. My character was shaped in lasting ways. But like kids do, our son Tony had an accident one day while in our care. And this accident set a ripple in motion that we were unable to stop. So at 7 months old, this boy that we had loved since before he was born, who we brought home from the hospital, who we delighted in, who had his sisters wrapped around his chubby fingers, was taken from us. And not only that, but we found ourselves embroiled in both criminal and child welfare investigations. And so we couldn't grieve. We couldn't even ask how he was doing because our children were being pulled out of school and a woman was sitting in our living room asking us questions about every facet of our parenting and our lives. If pain like this was caused by an accident, I was going to wrap my family in bubble wrap and be done. Never again. But there in our calendar, marked in red, were dates that I believe were orchestrated by God. 3 busy schedules coordinated 6 months earlier to set aside a long weekend. The only people who could get me out of my self-imposed exile were already scheduled to spend time with me and my family. There are few people I trust my story and my heart with like these 2 friends who will sit with me and cry with me and love me and hold my hand and only wipe away their own tears when they can wrench their hand from the grip of mine. In the middle of the gathering dark, there was time and there was space for them to gently lead me towards the light. I wanted to hide, but I got to run to them. Jesus challenges his followers in this passage to reject selfishness and fear and self-preservation for a transformed, fruit-filled life, but Jesus does not leave us alone when we do so. As the grief started to fade, I saw in our extended community our family and our friends and our church family who had loved our son just as much as we had. There was fruit. The ripple effects of Tony's time with our family reached farther than I knew and probably farther than I'll ever know. I wonder if the composer of Hamilton had this image of Jesus in mind as he penned some final thoughts for our lead character. Legacy, what is legacy? It's planting seeds in a garden you never get to see. Sometimes we don't get to see the fruit. Sometimes we have to trust that it is growing unaware and unseen. But sometimes we do. Because for us, Tony is still in our lives. And there was healing and redemption in that story. And although we don't get to see him or his family enough, we do watch him grow and celebrate his milestones with his adoptive family through our Facebook friendship. I began this morning talking about legacy, and I want to leave us there too. Because as I look around at you, I know that you have stories. Stories of the adventure that has been following God. Stories of the unexpected beauty produced by the master gardener in a life willing to be planted. You have witnessed drought, and you have witnessed great harvest. You have testimonies of God's goodness and faithfulness, God showing up for you like God did for me. So may I suggest this morning that we hold one another when life is hard, when the sacrifices don't seem worth it, when the risk of transformation is too great. When my days are hard, or my task is too overwhelming, or my faith just does not seem big enough to do what God has asked me, I could look out at you, at the orchard of beauty that is all around me. Beautiful, full, fragrant, life-giving fruit. Friends, if we want to leave a legacy, may it be the orchard that is produced with lives fully yielded to our good God, who is a master gardener. Lives planted, lives transformed. Unless a grain of wheat falls into the earth and dies, it remains a single grain. But if it dies, it bears much fruit. Amen.